one skill or trait do you feel it is imperative for someone to be successful?
The ability to forget the thought of loss or failure. So I think, and not to be afraid of it, right? Like we're all going to lose, we're all going to fail at something. I call them learning outcomes. So, if you have a failure, think it's a learning outcome, you learn from it and move on.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Raving Patients Podcast. As you know, I'm your host, Dr. Len Tau. And as always, I'd like to thank my sponsors, Dental Intelligence, CallRail, and Net32 for their support. And throughout this episode, you'll hear little commercials, 30 seconds or so from each of those. So if you have interest in using any of those products, please reach out to them. It's super helpful to the sponsors. Also, my event, September 25th through 27th, we're doing a 3-day event now. Next year, September 25th through 27th in Fort Lauderdale at Pier 66. So you can check it out at superchargerdentalpractice.com and learn more about next year's event. Today's episode is called Data-Driven Dentistry, and my guest is Paul Chadwick from PureLogic. And I will read Paul's bio and we'll jump into the content quickly here for you guys so we can make sure we get everything done. So Paul brings over a decade of experience in enterprise sales and consulting, blending strategic insight with hands-on approach to growth and innovation. With an MBA and a background working with leading SaaS and consulting organizations like Sixth Sense and Shift Paradigm, formerly LeadMD, Paul has spent his career helping businesses align technology, people, and processes to drive smarter revenue outcomes. Now at PureLogic, Paul is focused on bringing a fresh data-driven perspective to the dental industry, leveraging AI and automation to transform patient communication, boost practice efficiency, and elevate the overall patient experience. So please welcome to the Raving Patients Podcast, Paul Chadwick. Paul, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
So Paul, PureLogic is still a fairly new company in the dental industry. Yep. And I know you're new there specifically. So I think the best thing to do here is, for those that may not be familiar with what PureLogic is, can you really tell the listeners and viewers what PureLogic does or what their role is in the dental industry?
Yeah, of course. I think if I kind of want to zoom out a little bit, I think of it in two different ways. One being, I think the bucket is front office optimization, right? We still know about 80% of the business and revenue is going through the front office phones, whether that's call center or the direct phone lines themselves. So how are we approaching that volume of phone calls into a better patient experience, into convert booked appointments, and how do we kind of leverage, whether it's phones to analytics to agentic AI to support that effort? And then the other piece is really just data-driven, kind of what we're going to talk about a little bit today. On top of that is think about like marketing attribution. So there are a lot of folks who are spending money on marketing. How do we understand where these potential patients are coming from, and how do we track that lifetime value from somebody that's maybe a net new patient to an existing patient and start to track some of that analytics? So our goal really is to provide, dial down, transcribe, summarize all the information that's happening on these calls to support the practice from a decision perspective. So why are things not getting booked? Why are things getting booked? And then ultimately just try to meet the patient where they're at. So I'll get into more of those details there, but the total outcome is, if we're spending money on marketing, how are we tracking it? If we're looking at a better patient experience, how are we supporting that? And how are we not letting revenue go out the door through high volume of phone calls, et cetera? So.
And I think the easiest, you went into a very deep explanation, which I think was great. But basically, I think to keep it easy for the listeners, you're an AI solution that literally will record phone calls and report data on those analytics is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Just to make sure, I want to get it right out there. So what exactly you guys do? So.
Yeah, I think I even like to maybe simplify it even more. We're collecting a ton of data through phone calls, conversations through our AI platform, and surfacing it up in a way that we can digest it and make decisions.
Got it. Okay. So you integrate into any phone system, and when someone calls the office, you record the conversation and use that data is really what you're doing. So
yeah, and a lot of people sometimes think of us as a phone provider. We do provide the tier 1 phones that compete with the Mangos and the Weaves out there, but that's not really our true differentiator, if you will. That's kind of the blocking and tackling in the front office, right? Everyone can have a tier 1 phone system. We integrate with all of them. We also supply our own. It's really the layering on the AI on top of the phones, to your point, to track outbound, inbound. What are patients saying? What are front office people saying? How are we looking at our missed call volumes? What are things? Why are reasons people aren't booking appointments? So all that stuff we're starting to capture through the phone. So it doesn't necessarily, we don't need to have our phones in there, but we can layer on other phones.
And that's why I said you're tapping into someone's phone, so they do not need a phone through you, which I knew.
Correct. Yep.
But do you only work for someone who's listening to this and say, oh, that's a really good idea, do I qualify? They have to have a VoIP system, correct? You can't
Correct.
do it to regular phone lines.
Yeah, it's all based off VoIP, because that's where you get your recording. That's where we can then surface that back up to you as, here's what we transcribed, here's what we summarized, here's what we found out from that call.
I just wanted to confirm that those that have landlines, this is not a solution for them. That's what I wanted to get out of there. So.
Yep, exactly.
All right, so let's talk about this whole environment, because obviously, I know Mango very well. Mango's a very good friend of mine.
Yep.
I love the people there, love the product. AI is changing the industry. So what do you think the industry looks like right now from an AI perspective in your case? And then where do you see it going in the future when it comes to AI, specifically related to what you guys are doing, basically?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because AI can mean a lot of different things to different people. I almost break down AI or agentic AI in the front office or any kind of, let's call it medical field, as like, what is the modality you're engaging with the AI? So what I mean by that is, are you placing a phone call and the call it's answering is actually a voice AI and that's taking you through a conversation? Are we texting you back through a text modality that's driven by an AI engine and responding to your text through natural language processing? Or is there a web chat or a bot that's on your website or landing page that you can also converse with, et cetera? So what we're seeing in the initial studies when we found and ran voice versus text, we saw a lot of higher engagement rates with text based on where they're at in that call. So I kind of use the example like American Airlines. You call American Airlines, you have to hit 1,000 buttons. You're like, just give me your operator, 000. Let me just talk to somebody, right? So so we knew there was some kind of exhaustion in the market from having voice AI be the front line. We're seeing that change a little bit, which I'll go into in a second. But where we found a lot of success was putting text messaging on the back of a missed call or a voicemail. So it's triggered off of, I call in, the office can't make it, they're busy, out to lunch, outside of office hours. We can trigger a text that actually has an empathetic tone that can learn what you're saying, engage with the patient, go all the way to the point where it's integrated with the PMS or your central system that's leveraging all your patient data, and pull the patient name, insurance, and then actually book the appointment without anybody in the front office lifting a finger. So text modality was that was our starting use case. So you can see that apply to busy front offices or outside of office hours. Where we're seeing now is like my wife, when we go to the pediatrician, she wants to text. She doesn't want to call anybody. So like, how do we look at leveraging that text? And then there's also people that don't want to text or just don't like that. So how do we engage the voice side of it? So from the way we look at it now is like providing at every stop or option for a patient to go, how do we meet them at where they want to go? And so we're seeing some unique information come back. Well, so we have voice AI now too, which we can layer on. We can kind of now, so we have voice, text, and a web chat. And ultimately those three modalities can be dynamic in any practice, right? Like a practice may always want to talk to Susie at the front desk. So having voice AI up front, probably not the best. Then I talk to other practices where office managers are switching out every 6 to 9 months. What if they leave, they win the lottery, whatever it may be? How do we maybe turn voice AI on as a frontline defense to at least cover us before we go find somebody new to maybe backfill that position? So there's some different use cases that we're starting to see. Point being, we're seeing some interesting data on like even the text modality where I will text, book an appointment, and that person will actually start responding and texting the practice back and not even pick up the phone anymore. So we're seeing some really good numbers on response rates via text. And then subsequently having something on the website. If I'm just Googling things around, I land on your landing page. Oh, a chatbot pops up. Hey, how can I help you? Well, my tooth hurts. Can I book an appointment? So we're trying to meet the patient with where they're at. We have some stuff coming in the future on more of an outbound perspective from an email and those kind of things. But it's really, every person's a little different. Every person has a preference. And so how do we have all modalities available for a practice to kind of trigger or kind of configure them in a way that is best for that practice's wants and needs, and then also supports the patient and their experience within that practice.
So it's interesting, in the time that I first learned about PureLogic, you've actually added a lot of these AI agents, which wasn't something you guys did before. So now you're actually adding to a front desk receptionist role, you're adding to a website role by having a conversation via AI if the patient chooses to engage it that way.
Exactly.
Which before it was just a call recording software. Now it's grown from there, and now you're doing the AI stuff as well.
Exactly. Like think of all the call recording and the summarization and some of those basic analytics. Like that's great to have. Like that's just kind of baseline now. You need to have that regardless, right? And so how do we look at where do we take that to the next level? And so now we can kind of leverage that data to support the modality that best fits the practice, patient type, et cetera. That's at the practice.
So I'm very familiar with these AI agents that are answering phones, doing website chat and stuff. So I'm very familiar with them. There's, just to name a few, Annie, there's Flossie, there's a bunch of them. How does, again, I'm talking from a former dentist who practiced. I'm talking from their perspective now. How does someone differentiate between what these companies have to offer? Yeah,
great question. I mean, I would probably argue there's probably been 12 to 16 voice AI companies that have popped up in the last 3 to 4 months. It's when we think about PureLogic and what differentiates us, we've been around almost 5 years now, and all of it's been built on historically understanding and integrating with large PMSs, different systems to be able to facilitate and manage that data. So we've got basically the pipeline and the pipe, call it the piping in the back end already enterprise grade. Now we're just layering voice on that can be matched and additive to text, web chat, et cetera. So it'll get to a point, I think, in 3 months here where voice is probably going to be indistinguishable against all competition. It's who's got the most modalities, who's got the most integration into different PMS platforms, different items, and who can surface all the data up into one spot. And then subsequently, there's a whole concept of escalation, or like when you do talk to a voice or a text or a web chat, and I raise my hand and say, I still want to talk to a person. How do we take that, I'm raising my hand, I want to talk to a person, and serve that up to the front office in a way that's prioritized, clean, efficient? And so there's a back end to this as well that really can make sure the practice is humming along nicely from an efficiency perspective. And we can prioritize those based on, are they calling just to ask what our office hours are? Okay, that might be priority, low priority. They're calling about dental implants. That might be a number one priority. That's a high dollar ticket item. So how do we look at whether it's emergency to dollar amount to what they're calling about and prioritizing in it's almost like a task list, if you will, from an escalation perspective, because AI can only go so far. So how do we leverage all the modalities and then task that up to the front office to prioritize their time and make sure they're focusing on the right things?
That makes a lot of sense. It's funny. I obviously, like I mentioned, there's a lot of companies that do this now, and I help practices with their online reviews. That's the space I'm in. And I was just talking to a practice, and they just implemented about 3 months ago, they said an AI agent. I didn't ask which one, but I was reading the reviews that we're getting, and 3 patients left 1-star reviews because they had been so used to talking to a human being that they added an AI agent, and the patients were getting frustrated with the way, I guess, the calls were being handled by the AI agent. So I thought that was really interesting because I haven't seen a ton of stuff being written about the negativity that comes with it, but some people just don't like interacting with those types of agents. Yeah,
and I think we'll get to a point where we can start to look at the analytics, and we're working on some predictive stuff too, where based on, we call it what do we call it? It's the propensity to show score, essentially. So think about, if I'm an existing patient and I miss a lot of my existing, my patients or bookings or whatever that might be, I can start to kind of map that out and look at the different variables and say, okay, how did I engage with the front office? Do I always call? Do I text? So we start to we're going to get to the point where we can really align the patient experience to the modality they prefer, and then also understand what is the propensity to show, and start to then almost on the back end provide a better planning or a better ability to book some of these or overbook some of these patients, so we don't have a bunch of gaps in schedule.
Got it. Okay. Well, I thank you for at least covering that topics there.
Sure.
So let's get into some other more deeper questions here. So, what role do you think the conversation or call data play in operational decision making in a practice today?
I see two things. Primarily, the first use case is if the front office, we can surface up data, and I like to call it the reasons not booked. And so some of those reasons not booked could be patient lacks information, front office lacked information, didn't have insurance. And so we can start to categorize those reasons as to something why it's not booked. we're also surfacing up potential opportunities, whether it's a net new patient or an existing patient. So we're looking at the conversation hey, I called for a dental implant, but we didn't book it. Well, why not? So we use a lot of that data, and it's all recorded calls to go back to the front office, whether you have 1 office, 10 offices, 100 offices, and think of more of like a training exercise. So we can start to pull that information and help train the front staff to say this if you hear this, or provide better material to have a more educated conversation if we're just missing information within the office, so we don't lose any patients or potential opportunities to book those appointments. So I think training is kind of use case one. The agentic AI piece, the text modality and voice, I like to think a lot. I think the average right now from what we're seeing is about 38% missed call rate per office. So if we could engage with 65% of those via text, and we convert 30% of those at an average booking of, let's call it $250 an appointment, how does that impact the business? How does that impact what you're looking at, right? So the second use case is triggering AI to have a conversation and not let a patient not get contacted, whether they're new or existing. So using analytics to train and better optimize the front staff, and then also using AI to make sure things don't slip through the cracks and engage the patients if we are busy outside of office hours, et cetera.
That makes a lot of sense. So next question I have is, where obviously practices run through KPIs, the key performance indicators, and if your KPIs are good, you have a very successful practice. If not, you're going to have some issues. Obviously, you are able to gain these KPIs or look at these KPIs because you're gathering data in many different aspects of the practice.
Yeah.
Which ones do you think are most important for a practice to look at, and then which are the more difficult ones for you to analyze for you guys at PureLogic to kind of give data on, I guess you can say?
Yeah, I'd say the number one right now is missed call volume and missed call percentage. I think we know people call. If we miss it and we don't follow up, or you have a high volume office and you walk in Monday morning, you have 65 voicemails, like how are we prioritizing and going through that effort to reach back out to the patient? So missed call volume and missed call percentage, I guess, is probably the first thing we look at. And then that's where we start to trigger and say, okay, out of these offices, we're seeing a lot of missed calls. Why is that? Let's kind of layer one. Let's go look at why that is. Is it we're not open enough? The office hours are too tight? Someone takes lunch for 3 or 4 hours. Like, what are some of the reasons why we maybe can tighten up that window to decrease that missed call high volume? And then 2, if we start to see an increase, or if not an increase, but a decrease in that call volume, and people are starting to respond, we have agentic AI. So then we look at reasons why they're not booking. So let's say the call volume call miss percentage goes down, but the conversion rate to bookings isn't impacted. So now we can start looking, okay, what's our conversion rate at the net new patient level and the existing patient level? So we kind of start from the top down, missed call to conversion, and then those can kind of play off each other, but it's just more of an analysis of how did we do last month compared to this month. And then past the conversion, at that point we're looking at really how do we start to prioritize the type of appointments and the type of bookings in a specific practice, right? Because some practices are just do general. Some practices have surgical. Some practices bring in an orthodontist for 2 days a week. So how do we start to look at where do we find the most ability to impact revenue, but also to again, always about the patient experience. How do we engage the patient on some of those contact points? So I think that answers probably part one. Part two, it's interesting because we gather so much data, and a lot of the conversations I have from a single practice all the way to a DSO level, some people just have different KPIs that they like to measure. And so what we can do is really look at the database as a whole and then configure or provide or aggregate the data in a way that aligns to your KPIs if it's something different that's outside of what we're seeing. So we've done a lot of custom work. We've done a lot of visualization of some of that data, et cetera. But again, some people just have different preferences. Some people just like to go from what's industry standard. So we have the ability, since we have a ton of data, to do both.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Obviously, I talk to practices a lot about missed calls, and practices always tell me that they answer all the calls, which I know for a fact there's no truth to that. So in your data that you're analyzing, and you're obviously embedded in a lot of different practices, what do you think? What do you see as a typical missed call rate for just a regular practice? I'm just curious, based on your data, where things fall there.
I think we're seeing a 30 to 40% range. Like, I think the industry standard, but that combines the DSO. There's a lot more. The single practice, you're in the 30s to 40s. Some are really good. I mean, I see some that are in the 5 to 10%. and I see some that have, up in the upwards of the 40 or 50%. Now, are you looking at, there's two ways to look at it though too. Are you looking at missed calls during open office hours time? Or are you looking at missed calls towards the entire, 7-week 365, right? So like, or 365, 24/7, 365. So there's, some people look at the data differently. So I would argue you want to look at the open office hour times, and then, outside of office hours, some people have call centers, some people do some of those things, but that's where people I think get the numbers can get skewed depending on how you're looking at that data.
No, that makes sense too. Where do you're obviously analyzing a lot of data within practices, DSOs especially. Where do you think most practices need help after looking at and analyzing this data? Which KPIs do you think suffer the most, and where do you think practices need the most help?
I think the missed call thing is just consistently a problem across the board. And in the DSO space, we see a lot of partnerships with call centers or like after hours answering call services. And so it's almost like I kind of go back to the people process technology. What's the process? Who owns the missed call percentage or the missed call rate? If I'm the front office and I'm always used to having a call center back me up if it rings 3 times and it goes to the call center, I'm not rushing to answer the phone all the time because I know I have a backup. Well, we're seeing lower conversion in call centers for those types of situations versus putting the ownership on the front office to manage that. So we're seeing kind of some duality there, some interesting dynamics between the two around where does the ownership sit on some of those things. But I'd say, it's a tough question to answer because it kind of depends on the setup. Single practices, I look at office hours, I look at how many days they're open, some of those things like, is it just a family style business? Is it we're trying to grow and acquire more practices? So it kind of depends on what growth mode you're in. If you're just a single practice, you want to be a family practice and that's it. You're in the rural area or whatnot, like some of these things may not totally apply. But if you're the dentist who's looking to potentially move out of the dentistry game and ultimately pick up a few more practices and think about operationally, we starting to look at those KPIs, right? And start to look at how we're performing and how do we benchmark some of that stuff. And certainly the DSO space, a lot of the DSO space, all that stuff is a main focus when we think about missed calls. But the big one in the DSO space is marketing attribution and where we're seeing an ROI in marketing spend. So that's probably how I'd break it up. There's probably 3 tiers there. Single practice, you're emerging, call it like a kind of a smaller DSO, and then the full functioning DSO are looking at different things because you have a lot more people as you go up the chain.
100%. Yeah, the way DSOs look at stuff is very different than a single practice. So 100% agree with you on that. Let's talk about tech stack and practices. You obviously have not been in the dental space that long.
Yeah.
But obviously there's a humongous tech stack that these practices have, almost to the point that they're overflowing and there are services that overlap each other. They're not taking advantage of some of the platforms. I see that all the time. It's crazy to me when they have 3 software that all do the same thing, but they're using it for different things. So can you talk about, PureLogic obviously is using the voice over internet line, but what are they talking to the PMS? What PMSs do you integrate with? Can you just kind of talk about that as well?
Yeah, for us specifically, I think we started doing the phones because that just was it. We were able to include those into the package so you could write off another vendor and say, here, now we have phones, analytics, and agentic AI all in one house. So then you go up market. Some people just have agentic AI or just let's call it like the voice AI or the text. Our goal is like we can kind of typically consolidate up to 2 to 3 vendors, whether it's VoIP, call it call analytics, and then also AI. So like we can do the voice, text, web chat to the call analytics. So you can have a different vendor for all 3 of those. We can handle all 3 of them. Now, we don't do a lot of the patient engagement like the dental intelligence stuff, which is why we have a lot of partnerships in the community, because that's just a different focus. It's a different beast. So think of us as kind of the frontline optimization component. But we, as we start to look at where we can optimize tech in different, whether you're single practice or DSO, it's really just understanding the use cases too. Like, what are we trying to accomplish? Are we just going to, we just need to have people on agentic AI outside of office hours because our missed call rates are great? Like maybe that's the only thing we need to focus on. Or, we're acquiring 15 practices and we need to consolidate all the tech, or we acquired 15 and every one of them has a different phone provider, right? Like, so how do we look at consolidating some of those? And so I see that a lot more in the DSO space. I also see a lot of contracts are interesting, how they're written up and how long you have to commit for and some of those things. So it's kind of, the further you go up, the harder it is to manage hardware. It's easier to manage the tech spend because you can consolidate, but it's back to understanding the use cases and then looking at what you have and saying, let's talk through what does future state look like. So it's a lot of future state analysis based off of what you have today.
Got it. And is there any practice management software that you know that you don't integrate with?
Not that I know of. We're pretty well integrated. I know Next Health. I know we have some integrations directly with partnerships at Planet DDS and some of those others. So I'd be shocked to know if there was one we don't at this point.
Got it. Where do you see the future? We already talked about, and I love AI. AI was a big popular topic at Supercharge this year. It was probably the most popular panel discussion that we had in a long time. We had people who were experts in AI, and it's amazing what AI can do now, and it's only getting better as time goes on. So where do you see the role of AI in the practice? Let's specifically keep it on the analytical front desk side. Not the other things that could get involved with as well. But let's keep it really to what your focus is where do you see the roadmap? Where do you see things 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road impacting how the practice runs from an efficiency perspective, supporting the team, reducing administrative strain, those types of things?
Yeah, I think when we get to like a really solid kind of final frontier with all these modalities, training the people in the offices, because there's always going to need to be a human element, at least for the indefinite future, right? So someone's going to, depending on the experience when you get to office, not anyone being in the office is a little awkward. But I see, one of the things we're working on, right? Like we have voice AI. If I want to step out for lunch, I can just click a button, turn voice AI on, and come back, turn it back off. So the ability to kind of configure and leverage AI at any point in the day. Maybe we leave text on after hours. Maybe we have voice. Just the ability to kind of look at the data and configure in a way that really just primes the office for always being on to take in new patient information or asks and then be able to respond. So, and then have, the real people there to facilitate some of that in-person experience. But the ability to leverage all those modalities in a way that really supports your patients, drives revenue and some of those things. So it's the configuration of the different modalities I think is interesting. And then I would say even future modalities of we think about ASAP lists or, emailing, I think more of the outbound play, I think is kind of the next part of all this, which is I know it kind of bleeds into patient engagement a little bit, but when we think about, there's 20 people coming with appointments, how do we reach out to them with AI and reschedule, confirm, et cetera? There's a lot of downstream things you can start to do with a lot of the data we have to support some, hey, we saw you got a crown or you did dental implants. Here's where people usually go next. Here's what we suggest. And so we can start doing some downstream marketing that can all be driven by AI and some of the data, which I think is going to be really interesting as we start to go down that path, because then it really starts to personalize the experience for the patients and not just be like, hey, your appointment's in a week. Will you be there? Yes or no, right? It'll be, hey, we saw you did XYZ. Here's typically where our patients go next. Did you know? And provide some data stat that, you should have a cleaning every 6 months. Here's why you should come in. So there's a lot of things we can start pairing with marketing material in the future that could be really interesting.
Got it. No, that's great. So time's winding down on the content portion of the podcast. So is there anything that we haven't discussed that you feel like that we should discuss regarding the content portion of it?
No, the only thing I would say is from a PureLogic standpoint, we're a fast-growing startup. We're venture capital backed. Our goal is to partner and hear from our customers and learn and grow with you, right? We see a lot of things in the market. We have a lot of suggestions on best practice, but I do think everyone has a little different flavor of how they want to do things. And, we're not here to say there's one way to do it all. There's only one way to do it in every scenario. So we do a lot of work with our partners and customers to make sure that we're providing the best service and the best data available so they can make the best decisions.
I think that's great. We'll get your contact information. We'll get how people can reach out to PureLogic in just a little bit once we finish this next section, which is a fun section for me. Cool. I like doing this. It's called our lightning round Q&A. So I am going to pull up my little product here, and we're going to go through some questions for you. These are specifically designed to be answered fairly quickly. Okay, so no long drawn-out answers here. So the first one, which is generally a tougher one, what profession do you think is the most undervalued today?
Ooh.
Could be anything, not just dentistry, anything.
Ooh. Undervalued today. I think anything in operations. Like, operations is not easy. If you don't have that right, it's tough to move forward in any direction. Like, whether you're in operations from a finance, accounting perspective, or just purely, you got a lot of sites, a lot of whatever it might be. How do we make sure the process is defined? If there's no process, it makes it tough.
Got it. If you have one in the dental industry, who is someone that you would like to have as a mentor?
Ooh. So I've met him once or twice. Bill Newman is someone that I've had a few conversations with, and he's always been incredibly helpful in all things, especially since I've only been in the industry for about 6 months now. Helpful on kind of giving me the landscape. He's got a strong pulse on things. So, yeah.
Got it. Do you have a system in place to keep yourself organized?
I do, yes.
What do you have?
Yeah, short answer, yes. A couple of things. I'm a big to-do list guy. I Salesforce, big on tasks, big on reminders, and I always save about an hour in the morning to reflect and plan out the day and write down the top, typically 3 things I need to get done for that day.
Got it. Let's see. What do we got here? If you had to say in 2 years something you would have on your resume, what would it be?
Oh, I would love to be a part of PureLogic, get us to a point where we either acquired, partner, and really become the nervous system in the DSO space, and say we were able to do that in a way that aligned with a lot of different needs, asks, and wants, but with a common thread of data supporting that.
Sounds good to me. What one skill or trait do you feel is imperative for someone to be successful?
The ability to forget the thought of loss or failure. So I think, and not to be afraid of it, right? Like, we're all going to lose, we're all going to fail at something. I call them learning outcomes. So, if you have a failure, think it's a learning outcome, you learn from it and move on.
I know you've been in dental a short time, but how have you developed key partnerships?
I think the same way I would do it in any industry. I think it's understanding who the main key thought leaderships are. I mean, being on your podcast today, right? Like, getting to know you and at this level, asking questions, being curious, getting to know people who have been doing this a lot longer, and just kind of getting a feel for where people think, or what people think, where they feel like the industry's going, and some of those things.
Got it. What book do you want to go back? What book do you want to go back and reread, as it made a great impact to you on the first time you read it?
And this is going to be probably a common answer for a lot of people, but How to Win Friends and Influence People. I feel like it's just some of the messaging and the rules to follow in that book are just always good to reread and kind of apply to life, for sure.
Got it. What deserves more of your attention but seldom gets it?
I'd say like self-learning, or like the ability to continue to work on myself, whether from a sales perspective, relationship, those things, investing time for myself on that.
Which leads to the next question is, if there's one thing that you can learn in your life, separate from what we're talking about, anything you could take a master class in, what would it be on?
I do have a thought on this one. How to be helpful in all scenarios. I think just be helpful is probably the motto. So I would take a master class on that, because that can span from work to business to personal. Doesn't matter.
Great. Describe Mondays for you in one word.
Monday's one word. Go -time. Go time.
Okay. All right. Who has been your greatest inspiration?
Probably my uncle. And it's a personal thing, but he's been in business for a long time, worked in private equity. So I just was able to follow how he had relationships and managed through work, life, and it's always been something that I've always aspired to be like.
Okay, 2 last questions. What habits have helped to make you successful?
Consistency, following through on what you say, and just simplifying those things. Like you asked me earlier, I write 3 things down a day that I need to accomplish. Even if I need to accomplish 15, what are the top 3 things I need to do? start with just, doing those first three things, and then more will follow.
Got it. Last question, and this is either business or personal. It doesn't have to be just business.
Sure.
What is one subscription? So either something you pay for monthly or annually, a subscription that you can simply not live without.
Ooh. Well, I like to watch College Game Day, so YouTube TV, probably. College Game Day, and then Red Zone. Big sports guy.
Love my Red Zone. The Red Zone is the best channel ever created if you're a fantasy fan. So,
exactly it.
So, Paul, if people want to find out more information about PureLogic, how it can integrate in their practice, how it can help their practice, what's the best way for them to get more information? Who can they reach out to? You have an email address, phone number, anything there that you want to provide?
Yeah, you certainly can reach out to me, paul@purelogic.com. PureLogic.com too. Our website has forms and things that you can go check out and take a look there. But it's probably easiest to go through me. I can get you in touch with the right person. It could be me. It could be somebody else. But we're here. We're here to help. Here to have questions. We're here to answer questions. So.
Got it. Great, Paul. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys. If you like the episode, please like us. Please review us. Please share the episode with a colleague. Let them know that you thought what PureLogic does is something that's really interesting and they should check it out. I do this. I want to thank the sponsors, Dental Intelligence, CallRail, and Net32 for their support, allowing me to come to your inbox every single Friday. I appreciate their support, and you should check them out as well. And as I end every single one of my episodes, remember, your reputation matters. Until the next episode, Paul, thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks so much. Take care.